deal killers for business sales is the business owner believes they're ready and they have not figured out what their next identity is going to be. Because as a business owner, most of us are like, we are the business owner. I'm a successful HVAC company owner. I'm a successful financial advisory business owner, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, in 90 days, you get going and boom, you sell it. And tomorrow you're not that. So how have you approached that? Because I think that's something I really want to dig in more and more with our clients.
Yeah, what a good question. There's not a cookie cutter approach. And kind of stepping back just a bit when you said, people come to you and they're ready to just sell because they're sick of it. They have no time. It's not producing the profits that they thought it was going to be. This is not the glory life that they thought it was going to be. That's another myth. Like, you don't get into business ownership for the freedom and flexibility that you're going to have and the financial success. Eventually, sure, it will come.
Welcome to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, a podcast for purpose-led entrepreneurs looking to master the art of buying, selling, or optimizing small businesses. Your host, Chris Seegers, founder of Exceptional Companies and author of Selling Main Street, has over a decade of experience starting, buying, and leading successful businesses. He's here to guide you through the complex world of business transactions and growth. Each week, we dive deep with actionable insights, expert interviews, and real-world strategies to activate and equip you to live exceptionally and build exceptional businesses. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Here's your host, Chris Seegers.
Welcome to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, where we discuss how to buy, sell, or optimize your business. I am joined today by Kelly Ikenberry, a friend and wonderful guest. And we're going to talk a little bit about helping business owners build sellable businesses, which is my passion. Kelly grew up with farming roots in ag, just like me. And I'll tell you, she has an amazing ability to connect with any business owner in any industry, whether it be white collar or blue collar, manufacturing. And she specializes in helping people make more and play more. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I'm pleased to be here. It's a real honor.
I'm excited. And I appreciate you doing it. I know you've got some back pain, which always stinks, right? Like trying to get on a show and it's like you might be wincing at some point in time. And so you're one of those people that just fights through the pain, which I really appreciate about you. But tell us a little bit about your background, your story, how you got into entrepreneurship and helping business owners.
Absolutely. So I think it really begins with how I grew up. Growing up in farmland in Southeast Kansas, I think that is probably one of the most basic small businesses. I mean, truly, if you do not plant it, it will not grow. So there's no catch up. There's no, how do we figure this out after the fact? Plus, regardless of how the weather is, regardless of the time of day, you have to do the work. It doesn't matter. So you never get this week we had a holiday on Monday and there are no holidays in farming. You still have to show up. So I grew up around that. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs and small business owners. So it was just always the conversation. It was the lifestyle that we lived. And still to this day, my dad still has his own business along with farming still. My brother has his own. I have had mine collectively for about 20 years. And so at first I built a financial advising business. Now I've been coaching and consulting for 16 years. So I grew up with it, but then I was just always naturally drawn to people and patterns and why they do the things they do. And so my degrees in communication and psychology, and it's just continued from there.
I love it. Yeah. And growing up in ag taught me, I think, one of the most critical lessons you can have as a business owner, which is to control the controllables, because you got to do the hard work. But sometimes the hard work doesn't pay off in the season that you want it to pay off in. I mean, right now, like we put up a lot of hay in Southern Colorado, and normally we're like, we want rain, like we don't have enough rain. And this year we're like, okay, we need sun. We have too much rain, right? And every year, whether it's my grandpa or the ranch manager, they're always talking about how are the cattle going to perform? How is the hay going to perform? How's this? How's the irrigation water going to be? And it's like, I'm always like, hey guys, we've done what we can do. We put seed down, we put fertilizer down at the right time, and we're just going to have to roll with the things we can control. So I think, like, coming from that ag background, I've seen you bring that into the business consulting, where you help people understand hey, what are the things that you can't control? And let's just forget about those. And let's not let them stress us out. And then let's focus on the controllables. So digging into this a little bit more, as we think about helping business owners build sellable businesses, which is my biggest passion. I hate seeing business owners that build businesses that then when they're ready to retire aren't sellable for a variety of reasons. So that's one thing that you and I both help folks get to. But what are some of the themes or areas that you see come up again and again and again and again that you can just share some wisdom or insight or camaraderie with the folks that are listening to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you already mentioned one of them, which is control what you can control and just dive as deep into that as you possibly can. One of those things, and I find this to be fairly staggering, but even for myself, I didn't know this in the beginning. Now I take a very different approach to it, and it's all about the numbers. Really understanding not just what to track, but how to interpret what you're tracking and where to find that information. So, along with controlling what you can control, a big piece of that is knowing your numbers and what they're telling you. Every number has a different story. And unless you're tracking it as simply data points, instead of attaching a good or a bad to it, you're really missing out on a huge component of the business. And what I find is that a lot of entrepreneurs are very emotionally driven. They have a lot of passion. They have a lot of energy. They have a lot of passion. And so most of the time they are just trying to will it into existence. And
you're talking to me directly right there.
Entrepreneurs are a rare breed, but we're all in the same boat. And most of the time the numbers piece is not our specialty. And so often I hear, get a bookkeeper, hire the accountant, hire out the pieces that you aren't strongest in. And yet one of the things that I have seen happen to so many people, whether they're hiring an internal team, whether they're outsourcing, is that they are like, okay, I did what the book said. I hired out the things that I'm not strong in, but they forget they still have to inspect what they expect. So if they're farming this out, they still need to have their eye on it. They still need to get into that on a monthly basis, for example, if it's their numbers, if not weekly. And so those are a few things kind of all lumped together because it's a ripple effect. You can't isolate one aspect of business, just like you can't isolate business from life. And a lot of people try to do that when in fact they commingle life and business 100%. So
for sure. It's all one thing.
It is all one thing. So it's just acknowledging all of those components and that one affects another, but knowing your numbers and what they're telling you is really important. The other thing is that once we implement, and I just had this conversation with a client this morning, and what was brought up was just simply like a training aspect. So many people will say, okay, I hired, again, I'm doing what the book says. I'm building a team. Wonderful. But you have to reiterate not only the training, the how-to of the job, but also training the culture. And so, for example, even this morning, it was, the interruptions in the office. As you add people, there's more talk, there's more interruptions, and everybody can't do their jobs, which is usually where the training manual stops. Now we're implementing phase 2, which is training the environment, right? Here are the 5 things you look at before you go and ask a question of somebody else. And
I love that.
So
that's great.
You have to train that environment and that culture that you're wanting to get out of it. So it's something that's very common, but it's overlooked. And then it's okay, you haven't trained this yet, so you can't be frustrated about the last 2 months yet now. You have to hit the reset button today.
For sure.
And then track progress moving forward instead of thinking they need to change by next week.
I love it. So I want to dig into a couple of things there because you put it so eloquently. So when we value a business or analyze a business to say, is it sellable? Is it, healthy or not healthy? There's like hundreds of variables. And so it's very overwhelming for business owners. But I always say, okay, let's make it really simple. It's the 3 Ps. It's profits, people, and processes. There's all kinds of other stuff, but those are the three things. If you're strong in those three things, you're going to have a great sellable business. And so if we go back to your point on knowing your numbers, and I want to put this out, I've been trying to correct a lot of myths in social media. So right now, buying small businesses is really in vogue. There's a lot of people talking about it, a lot of people that have never owned a business, that have never done what we've done. And so there's a myth, I believe, that is, hey, you can buy a small business and it's passive. I believe that's 100% false. And I think it sets you up to be in a really bad position down the road by making decisions like you just said, hey, I'm not really good at this, so I'm going to delegate my numbers to this person. And I'll give you a great example. We had a manufacturing group we were looking at, and I was like, man, these numbers are all over the place. If somebody sends me their numbers, I can just like see the patterns immediately because I've looked at thousands of businesses. And I'm like, there's something weird here. And I hadn't even talked to the owner. They just sent us the numbers and I was going in pretty blind. So I went to him, I was like, man, this is not making sense. Your business should be substantially more profitable, probably in the tune of 150 to 200,000. You were here, now you're here. You've been all over the place. I'm like, I'm missing something. What's going on? And he's like, yeah, I didn't want to mention it, but my admin has been stealing in between $80,000 to $150,000 a year from me for the past 4 years. And in my head, I was really kind because this is a really tough position to be in. But I'm like, how do you let that happen? I understand if there's, some small amounts that are misappropriated or just people sometimes aren't being good stewards, but you've got to have your hands around your business. And that never stops, right? We want to help people work on their business and elevate out of it, right? And get to a point where it is more self-governed. But that doesn't mean that you can just say, hey, this business is going to operate without me. Now, once you get to a certain scale, maybe you can bring in people and still have them do a lot of the things. But I always am saying, hey, do I have my hand around my team? Do I have my hand around our processes and my hand around the profits? And if I don't, right, I better dang well get back into that business because that's how you get sued. That's how you get into bankruptcy issues, into big issues. So I really appreciate you bringing that out because I don't believe you can run a business passive. I think semi-passive is possible, but it's not real estate. It's not, companies are living, breathing organisms with people and clients and all these other big things that are changing all the time. And you can't just live in a vacuum and say, I've built this thing and now it's working really well. I'm going to go kind of hang out in Hawaii for 3 years. And I've seen actually a lot of my friends go down that path. And you can go for a ways before the thing falls apart, right? You can get 18 to 24 months of not doing your job. And then all of a sudden you're like, what's happening here? Why are all these things happening? So anyways, let's dig into that a little bit more about kind of semi-passive versus passive and building a self-governed, sellable business. What are some other areas that you really dive into with your clients to help them get to that point of elevating where they aren't just like in the business and reactive, but they're able to be more proactive?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point because I agree with you wholeheartedly. A business is not passive. These people who are buying businesses thinking the people are in place, the processes are in place. Now I just sit back and collect the profits and then get the distribution check and take it to the bank. Even when we are building to that point of more hands off, not having a day job, because most owners, from what I've experienced, is that they launch into their business and they have basically created their own flexible day job with their own rules instead of working for somebody else at a day job. Mm-hmm. So then as we elevate them to those next phases of ownership, so much of that education and training and track is developing their owner mindset. Because once they hit a certain level of success with their team, and let's say their team is running their processes really well, then that owner has to extract themselves from the day job. Otherwise, they're going to screw it up. That's just how it's going to happen. And so then they have to be thinking of what is my next piece as an owner. So they need to now be thinking about expansion. They need to be thinking about how do we dive into a certain demographic where we already have a little bit of head start, but how do I get the whole door open? So they don't pull away, but they also become very good at owner activities. And most of that is developing relationships, deepening the company brand, really reaching out. How do we increase the customer experience and utilize and develop their team so their team can function as autonomously as possible. And so a lot of that is then developing them as both manager and leader, right? You manage a process, you lead your people. So how are they managing their processes, and what kind of structure do they have in place so that even when they're not there, the team is still managing the process? They don't just say, oh, owner's gone, we don't even have to have our staff meeting. Yeah, you do.
Mm-hmm.
Communication is key.
Yep.
So it's developing those components of the business rather than it's passive. They're just going to run it and the
For sure.
process is in place. So I agree with you wholeheartedly, but those are the areas that we start to develop as we get the team functioning very, very well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great demarcation. Are you doing owner things, or are you doing employee in the business things? And developing that skill, because you alluded to it, if you stay in the employee type role, the manager role, you will micromanage your team to death and they will leave you. And that is a lot of small businesses where the owner just can't quite that. They're like, I can't trust this person, or I can't delegate this one thing. And it's like, once again, there's some things I do not delegate. There's some things that I will always do as an owner, but most of the things you can delegate. And we have this like delegation scale, and you probably got a similar tool where it's like, hey, you start with the things that are small, right? High impact, but small. Can't sink the business, but can move a big lever. And then you keep going up and you build that trust. And as you build that trust, you're delegating more, and you've got the systems to make sure that there's never a way for it to entirely fail. And one of the owner things that I had a conversation with a guy that was really frustrated. He's got a really good business, but had lost a key employee. And was like, man, I'm just like so tired of having to find employees, which is probably every single business owner in the world right now, right? It's just a tough environment. And I said, man, as an owner, all I'm doing every day is recruiting. Anywhere I go, if it's a coffee shop, if it's a networking event, if it's to my church, if it's to my son's soccer game or baseball game, all I'm thinking about is there a human being that we need on our team that's got a great culture, even on a business we don't own yet. I've got a group of who's that I have in a spreadsheet that's like, there's 5 businesses we're going to build over the next 10 years. And I'm like, here are the people that when we're ready to launch that, those are those people. And he's like, well, like, when does that stop? I'm like, never. I'm like, as an owner, like I'm always going to be selling, always going to be promoting the thing that we're doing really well because we serve people well. And I'm always going to be looking for talent. Even if I don't have to physically do it in the business and I have somebody that's hiring, I'm going to say, hey, you should check this candidate out that I met at the coffee shop. They're hungry, humble, smart. Let's try them out, that sort of thing. So I love that. So, okay, let's change gears a little bit. When do you think a business owner should reach out to you or me or anybody to start talking about business transitions? Because I think it's such an emotional, taboo topic that people just aren't comfortable with. And when should you start having those conversations?
As soon as you recognize you want to build a business that's sellable instead of a lifestyle business that's just going to let you live the way you want to live, that your old boss wasn't allowing.
I love that. That's really good.
To me, that's what I listen for when I start working with someone or when they approach me and we have that mutual interview, we sit down. That's one of the things that I'm really listening for. And I can hear different words they use or different phrases to know where their seriousness level is on that and if they even grasp the concept. Because again, so many people who get into their own business, it's because they're trying to leave a certain type of culture, environment, experience. They can do it better. Great. Do it better. But do you want to really create something that is sellable? That's a different thought process. So as soon as they recognize we have something sellable, this could be good. At that moment, they should be reaching out to somebody who has a very broad sense of what it takes to sell a business, because I'm a coach and consultant, right? I know my specialty, but that's why I engage with people like you. I engage with tax attorneys. I engage with other financial advisors who have sweet spots, because it requires a full court press.
For sure.
And we put client in the center, and then we ask from the HR component, we ask from the tax component, how do they need to be set up? How do they need to be paying themselves? What are they going to
Hmm.
be doing with the profit? Where does that get reinvested into the business? What kind of team makes sense? What does that org chart look like as they develop it out? And it's being able to have that global perspective
Hmm.
on not just how to build out the business, but I always ask the question, how involved is your family?
Hmm.
How much does this matter to them that you create a business that does, I mean, my company name is Make More, Play More. And it isn't so you can just take vacations, so you can be present with your family when you go home.
Hmm.
And what does that look like? And so it's all of those components that come into play. And so as soon as somebody recognizes they're really in the business and want to grow it and sell it, even if it's 20 years down the road, at that moment they should be reaching out.
I love that. Yeah. And the other thing too is I think people way overcomplicate this. And I think advisors overcomplicate it because they want to be needed. This is really simple. Like, and you and I have broken it
Mm-hmm.
down for clients, which is, hey, we need to understand where you are, current reality, what your business is worth, right? And what you need it to be worth to serve your personal and wealth goals, right? That's our guiding light. That's where we're going. That's the goal. Once we have that data, let's say it's $1 million business and you're like, I want to grow it to 5 million. Once we have that data, it gives us all of the things that need to be done to take it from 1 million to 5 million. And then we just have to put it into a system like EOS or some sort of plan that says 3 years, 1 year, 90 days, here are the things that we are going to do to improve the enterprise value of the business. And then we track it and we do these 90-day sprints. And on a 90-day basis, then you know exactly what your business is worth. And you get to say, I love this. I want to keep growing it. It's worth 5.2 now, but I'm still having fun. Cool. We keep growing it. Or you say, nope, I've achieved my personal and wealth goals. And now I want to sell. So every 90 days, you get to make this decision of like build, sell, build, sell. But you now, as a business owner, are in the power seat to know exactly what it's worth, how quickly, when you could sell it, what the buyers might look like, what that transaction would look like, what the fees, the taxes, the legal implications are going to look like. And you've been able to build that out over a 1 to 3 to 5 year period. So when you're ready to go, it's like everything is just so streamlined. A lot of our clients we get are just like, I'm sick of this thing. It's my health is failing, or I'm not getting enough time with my kids. Sell it today. And we help a lot of those folks. But man, if we have 1 to 3 years to really build out that enterprise value and get it organized, it's just so much more streamlined. I love that. So,
Do you like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking the subscribe button now and check out our website, www.excoadvisors.com. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
let me ask a totally different question because this has come up with every single client we've had. How have you helped coach sellers or people transitioning, whether it be in business or not, on creating a new identity or purpose outside of business ownership? Because this is one thing that I try to do is I always want to remove friction. So when a deal doesn't happen, we always go back and say, what happened here? Why did this not happen? What did we miss? What did the client miss? What did the other people miss? And one of the biggest deal killers for business sales is the business owner believes they're ready and they have not figured out what their next identity is going to be. Because as a business owner, most of us are like, we are the business owner. I'm a successful HVAC company owner. I'm a successful financial advisory business owner, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, in 90 days, you get going and boom, you sell it. And tomorrow you're not that. So how have you approached that? Because I think that's something I really want to dig in more and more with our clients.
Yeah, what a good question. There's not a cookie cutter approach. And kind of stepping back just a bit when you said, people come to you and they're ready to just sell because they're sick of it. They have no time. It's not producing the profits that they thought it was going to be. This is not the glory life that they thought it was going to be. That's another myth. Like, you don't get into business ownership for the freedom and flexibility that you're going to have and the financial success. Eventually, sure, it will come, but I work with companies that have 1 employee. I've worked with companies that have 110 employees. I've worked with the small 6-figure company. I've worked with the 15 million revenue company, all in between. over 55 industries. The owners who recognize that they have to have the mental and emotional stamina to stick with learning people skills, because in order to get to those levels, they have to have some size of a team.
For sure.
Having a sounding board, which I think is the role that I often fill for them, where they can call me and say, fire them all. I'm ready to fire them all. And they vent and they get it out of their system. And then we figure out, okay, well, why are you going to fire them all? Because they interrupt everybody 12 times a day and I can't get anything done. Oh, well, there's a solution for that. I have one of my favorite sayings, and I hear my kids walk around the house and say it, there's a solution for everything.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to know they're not alone. It's not, they go out in the world and they meet these other owners and they all sound like, oh, I've got this streamlined system and it's beautiful and it's on paper and I don't have any headaches, and I go home and I coach my kid, whatever team. They're also up until 1 o'clock. They're also up at 4 a.m. to do the work. So there's this, I think there's this flowery myth that is not happening, and it is happening, and I get to hear the stories. So when it comes to developing this identity outside of their business, there's so many different things that start to come into play. And it's also why it's so critical, as soon as somebody recognizes I'm building something that somebody else could buy. And I've helped people sell even what appear to be unsellable businesses. They're not trades companies, they're design firms, they're interior design, they're real estate firms, right? Where it's a book of business that you're selling. Even for them, so much of everything is tied up into it. And so as soon as they have that thought, I think I could create something that could be sellable, we immediately start talking about, what are you doing in your free time? What are your interests? What are you doing? If somebody doesn't have that forethought and they come to me, I'm thinking of an auto shop owner I worked with who he knew he could sell his business, but he was never ready. Like he had one of the bays in his shop actually reserved for his own pet projects. He didn't even have it open so that he could make money off of it. I had to start prodding him when he said, I think I could sell this. I think I'm about done. My wife's going to retire in a year. I think I'm about ready. And I started asking him, what are you going to do? And it took us about the entire year to work through the emotional side. And the other component of this is not just that it's their identity, but if they have truly built a culture and people who are attractive to a buyer, then those are family members. Those people, they care about them. And most owners, from the ones that I have worked with, if they do not have a strong enough reason or strong enough desire outside of the business, they will stay for their people because they do not want to see their people broken apart.
Yeah.
So that's the other component that goes into it. And so the most successful is to start that conversation early. And even if it's as soon as they come and say, I'm ready to sell. Okay, great. What are you going to do when you do?
For sure.
How do we get past that? Because it's not an easy answer.
Yeah,
it takes time.
We always say, how are you going to spend your time, your talents, and your treasure? Right? The 3 T's. It's like, because, and usually they'll give you an answer that's not a good answer. And that's where like a lot of people stop and I don't. They'll be like, well, I'm going to golf all the time. I'm like, okay, so you're 72 years old. How many times can you golf in a week before your body starts hurting? Well, probably 2. I'm like, okay. So what about the rest of the week? Like, what are you doing with that? And what are you good at? Right? Because I'm part of a church and churches do not know how to deal with entrepreneurs. And so if you're in a church and you retire from being a business owner, the first thing they're like is you should be a greeter and greet people. Instead of like, hey, you've got this brilliant operations mind or this brilliant financial mind or this brilliant execution mind. We need that in the church, or we need that in this nonprofit, or we need this in my son's baseball league, or whatever it might be, right? And so it's like we try to just say, hey, all the things we love doing, we're skilled at, we should like go do the other things. And I'm like, that's the exact opposite of what you should do, right? It's a transition of what you're doing, but it's still the same passions and pursuits in a different way that's serving you and your family better. Okay. So I've got two more questions. If you could give some advice to younger entrepreneurs, because we coach a lot of buyers that are wanting to come in and buy these baby boomer transition businesses, which is it's like $1 trillion transition. If you think about a 25-year-old Kelly that's coming into the space in 2025 for this year, like what would you tell her?
Don't know everything. Don't pretend to know everything.
That's really good.
That would be it. Don't pretend to know everything. Use your community, and that would be the internal community. Become very observant. If you're buying a business that has a team, do as much as you can to align yourself with them, not necessarily as a peer, but as someone who has their backs, because that team immediately thinks they're on the chopping block. And if they are running a successful process and structure within the company, you want to retain them. So don't go in thinking you know everything. Don't go in and try to change everything when it's not broken. Learn from them. Observe what they're doing that's working. Give it at least, it's hard to put a time frame on it, but if it is working, watch and ask, how does this work? Why does this work? And let them teach you. Then come to the table with, here's what we're going to do to elevate it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, so final question. What is working really well for you? What's teaching you really well? What's inspiring you well? What's a tool, a book, a resource that you're like, this just is awesome, and I'm really loving this thing, and I think it would be useful for our viewers and listeners?
Absolutely. There's a couple. One of them is part of the last answer is community. Find a community. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business owner, you are isolated. You cannot turn to your team with the questions that you have about your business. You can't learn from them. They will not come to you and say, hey, I think we need a change. They don't want change. They want to keep things as is. You have to create a community of not just like-minded people, but people who are wanting to grow, people who are wanting to raise the bar, raise the standard. And again, I'm a big observer. I have learned that just being at the table and listening to the conversation is sometimes the best way to learn, because it will often be, at least for me, I never even thought about that. Wow, they're thinking about that. I didn't even think about that. Fascinating. Like, I love the work that I do because every owner that I get to work with will ask a question. I'm like, I didn't even think about that. But what a great question. And it makes me raise my bar. So community is a really big component of that. But being the quietest person in the room sometimes is even a better part of being that part of that community. The other piece is that, so I've been a consultant for about 16 years. For the first 6, I was 100% against any kind of assessments, behavioral, any of it. Because when I worked in the corporate world, my department head or my boss would always bring in some consultant who would do some assessment. And it was always, it felt like it was being done to us. Like, we're going to sit around the table now and I'm going to tell you how you're needing to improve.
Yeah. We're going to put you in a box and you need to be in that
We're going to put you in a box and we're going to label you. And then, and we're going to have fun for 2 hours. And then everybody's just going to go back to being themselves. And we're going to have the same issues that we always had.
I got to tell a story. I want you to tie it back in with the output of the tool. But so I started an oil company with some guys in 2016. And we started using an assessment called the Culture Index. And my partner then he would weaponize anything, which, that was a lesson for me to really understand. Hey, we need to use these for our team and be kind in the way that we do this. Anyway, and the guy that did the assessments, it was so funny because he didn't know me. So I ran the business. I had 2 partners. They were off falutin doing the thing. I ran the business, hired every single person there, grew the thing. And so this consultant comes in and he's like, all right, he's going through this guy. CEO, oh, you're the greatest personality profile in the world. You're kind of like Jesus and, Dalai Lama and all these things. The guy paying his bills, he thinks. And I'm kind of sitting over there. And then he's like, okay, who's Chris? And I'm like, right here. And he's like, yeah, man, you'd be really good as like the administrative assistant. Like you'd really be like, you'd be great at that. And he's like, so like, what do you do in the business? I'm like, well, I run the business, soup to nuts. And he's like, oh, sorry. I'm like, so I think you might've missed something. But anyways, so go back to the tools because that's not the way to use it, right? Like that. And honestly, that made me so angry that I didn't want to use the tool, even though I knew it was useful. Like at that point, I was like, man, this is not right. We shouldn't be using this thing, even though it was giving us good clarity on some things.
Well, and that's the thing. And I agree, right? So I was like against it. And then I finally came across someone who her whole shtick was that she was certifying people in the DISC assessment, DISC. It's a behavioral based assessment. And her whole thing was that she was training people to learn how to interpret and apply the results. And that was something totally different than anything that I had seen. Most people will train from the stand and give you a certification. I actually have two, and they're centered around the DISC assessment. I'm officially a certified behavioral analyst, which is very
Nice.
fancy of
That is
just
very fancy.
saying I know people patterns. But it's all in the interpretation and application of those results. So if a person goes to my website, as opposed to a Tony Robbins website, Tony has a free version on his site. If somebody just wants to get a quick readout of, oh, I wonder what I am, they can take that and they can get it and they'll read the document and they'll say, yep, that sounds like me. And that's it. So sometimes it provides clarity. But working with someone and utilizing a tool like that, so utilizing the tool and then working with someone who knows how to interpret the results, apply them to daily life, roles, responsibilities, all the different hats a person wears, not labeling them, not pigeonholing them, not putting them in a box, and then helping them apply and break down like what it is in that report was incredibly valuable to me. It helped me professionally, personally. Sometimes I joke and say the only reason I'm still married is because I fully understood my husband's DISC results and understood, oh, well, this is why he is the way he is. And it removes the finger pointing. It removes the like, why can't they do this? Well, because it's not in their wheelhouse. So you can either continue to fight against it or accept it and let's work with what they have. So that was an incredible tool once it switched over to the interpretation and application phase.
I love that. And we use the DISC, we used the Culture Index survey for a while, and then Colbier, we've kind of dabbled in all of them, but the DISC I found to be super useful and affordable. Honestly, you want it to be affordable. And when people ask me about it, because we send it to new hires, I say, hey, this is to help us understand how to put you in your unique abilities and the biggest percentage of time in the business is possible. We can't always have you do the things that you love doing that you're really good at. Every business, you're going to have to do some things maybe that aren't there. But if I could get you 80%, and to use Jim Collins' analogy, 80% in the right seat on the bus, man, you're going to love working with us and you're going to do great work because it's enjoyable and it's within your talent set. So I love that. So Kelly, thank you so much. It's always a blast hanging out with you. So where can people find you? So if anybody needs somebody to help them, business coaching, HR coaching, DISC assessments, like just help your business, where can they find you, Kelly?
My website is my name, kellyikenberry.com. But the best way is shoot me an email, kelly@kellyikenberry.com.
And spell your last name out too for people.
Okay.
Because that's a long last name.
So it is a long last name. So Ikenberry is IKENBERRY.
Love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much for the time, and we'll catch up soon.
All right. Thanks, Chris. This was great.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Exceptional Companies Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you liked this show, please reach out through our website, www.excoadvisors.com, for free tools to order a copy of Selling Main Street, or to sign up for our free webinar on how to sell your Main Street business.